Whatever's there, you make adjustments and don't fall into the trap, because I promise you, there are a lot of idiot agents out there. Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Rogers. It's August 31st.
This is Russell Rogers. We're the Rogers team from Keller, Southlake. Doug, how'd that listing appointment go today?
I got a story for you. Two different agents look at the same house. The seller is very experienced, transferee, major corporation in the middle of corporate America. He knows what his house is worth. I came up with a number in the 580 range, and the other agent came up with a number at 650, $70,000 higher than my number. At first, that would seem uncomfortable. That, oh no, have I got it wrong? No, I had it right. I had it right all along. Why do agents come up with a number that's so high that you can't use a comparable sale to justify it? There's no comparables there. It's not justifiable. Why do agents do that?
Yeah, it's called buying the contract or buying the listing agreement or buying in. It's whenever you are trying so hard to win, even though you know the house won't sell for that amount, just so you can get your foot in the door. It's actually a contractual thing as well. When you're getting into a contract, construction people know this, that they'll come in low and then do all these modifications on the back end. It's basically that in reverse. You come in high knowing that it won't sell for that, but then they're already kind of stuck with you, or they think they are, and then you can lower the price later, but at least you got the listing agreement. Like we talked about, realtors are getting desperate, so I don't know about that person. I'm not making a claim to them, but it could be that case, and I've seen it in the past as well.
Well, if you look at the fine print, I guarantee you that listing agreement is either 6 months, 8 months, or 12 months long. It's not a 30-day or 60-day or 90-day listing agreement. It's a long, moving out quite a bit so that they can have time to say, well, guess what? The interest rates are high. Oh, guess what? The market died. There's something going wrong, or there's something wrong with the house. It's not going to be that they had the number wrong at the very beginning. It's going to be some excuse that they come up with. But, ironically, if you accurately price a home, you'll get the highest and best value for it. You may even get an over list price offer in this marketplace, but not if you're $70,000 above list, or what it should list for.
Yeah, and you're putting your sellers in such a bad position doing that. Like, it's incredible to me. And I don't think I actually see them ever list for those amounts. I mean, some you do. You see crazy ones all the time. You're like, oh my goodness. But I can almost imagine when they actually get to the final step, they talk them down to doing, 585 or whatever the number is, and it looks totally different. So the question is, why did they get that original amount? Right? What was that really based on? I would say it's dishonesty is what it's based on.
Well, you have to have a comparable sale. I mean, I went back and the seller and I talked again, and so let's got on the computer and we looked again, and there is one house 2 or 3 miles away in a gated community on a golf course in a completely different setting. It's a completely different subdivision that did sell higher, and it could get close to that kind of 650 number, but it's apples and oranges. It's not. This home is not in a gated community. It's not in that subdivision. It's not on the golf course. It's a good, solid house in the right place. So, you got to there's 2 ways you can price a house. One is through comparable sales, and the other is through wishful thinking. And sometimes you just have to bear down and look at the numbers and look at the houses. In this day and age, we've got 20 to 30 and sometimes more virtual tours to look at the interior of the homes that you're comparing to. You go in and you look at the interior of the home. Is it got granite? It's got wood floors. Is the master bathroom updated? What's the swimming pool look like? If it's all comparable to your home, why would your house sell for $70,000 more than what your home should sell for?
Yeah, and it won't, right? Like, unless something crazy happens or someone's made a mistake or the comps are too old or not correct, basically, if it's not everything you just said, maybe, but if it's based on reality, it's not going to happen.
Well, one of my favorite realtors going back to the late 80s, Tommy Weatherby in San Angelo, Texas, used to say, she'd say, darling, I'm your realtor, not your fairy godmother, when she was talking about price.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes we're maybe marriage counselors or advisors of different kinds, but I don't think I've ever been a fairy godmother.
Well, I'll tell you another story. I can remember this is actually about 2004. I was showing houses in Bridlewood and Flower Mound, and there was this great house. It was on the golf course, and I was representing the buyer. And we're doing the comps and says, man, they got it for $505. This house isn't worth a nickel over $450. And the guy said, well, I don't know. What do you think? I said, well, it's not worth a nickel over $450. All the comps are right here. It's $450. It's a $450 house. So we wrote up an offer for 450, and guess what? They took it. I talked to the agent later on and said, yeah, I told them 450 from day one. It was 450, and they just wanted to see. And then, as you know, we were deep into the listing, and they finally saw an offer come along. You're the first one to make an offer. And I said, well, that's because you had it overpriced by 50,000.
Yeah, and I think there is a time to get really aggressive in pricing. Not like that scenario. That was way too much, right? But during that COVID time when you were getting so many offers, there was a time to be very aggressive. But reality still occurs. There's still appraisers out there. Things still got to appraise. They still got to get the loans. Unless someone's coming with all cash for way over, it's the deal's still not going to work. So you still got to live in reality. And that was really the only time, and I think everybody would agree, like the craziest time ever.
Well, that's when we went from being real estate agents to auctioneers. Because if you're the listing agent, you weren't a listing agent. You were an auctioneer. You were basically setting up an auction for multiple people to see the house. What's your record for most offers? My record's 29. I got 29 offers on one house.
Yeah, that beats me. I had that one for 26.
So 20-something offers, and you're just kind of going through them all, picking out which is best, and you're encouraging the top ones to bump it up a little bit. At the beginning of that COVID craziness, I had this one offer where it was really good. And it was silly good. And I still told the sellers, let's go back to them and see if they'll give you a month free in the house and if they'll pay the title policy. And they said, man, are you asking too much? I said, I don't think so. I think they'll take it. And of course they did. So thinking outside the box, even when it's crazy, you can make a little extra money with a good realtor.
Yeah, on that one with 26, I think I hit a home run on that one because we had the 26 offers come in. And I don't know if you saw this, but a lot of the top offers during that COVID time period were like just over the top good, and they ended up backing out. I think there was a lot of buyer's remorse involved. Oh, yeah. The prices were too high. They really wanted to win, but then when they really thought about it, like, is that house really worth $40,000 more than even what we thought would win? And so I think there was a lot of people backing out. It happened like 3 times in a row. So I was telling clients, like, don't get so tied up on this one. Let's work through our process, but be prepared for it to fall through because of those reasons. And so for that one that had 26, I actually, once we got under contract with the first one, I actually kind of went through a second bidding process where I had the second group, and I didn't tell them, it was only 2 of them, but I told them there was a second group, which sounded like it was even more competitive. And I told them, we are going to take a backup offer or backup contract if you want to do it, and you have the opportunity to raise your price and do, increase your terms, and we're going to take a look, and we're going to get under contract for the second one. And the second and third place were very tight. They actually started about 500 and worked their way up to, I think, 515, 520 or something through the process. And then even went above, they were jockeying for position. The third place actually went into second when they increased their backup contract offer 5,000. So they ended up being second place. And that first contract did fall through actually on the same day, just a few hours after we signed the backup contract. And there you go. So just that opening that second round, being the double auctioneer, I guess, basically brought the client at least $5,000 just from those conversations. So that's another tailored services example that we look at whenever we're doing these type of things in that crazy environment. But it's not always that crazy, so you can't always count on that.
Yeah. Well, that was your intuition started when? When did you think it wasn't going to work? From the very beginning?
From the very beginning, because it was the father was putting up like whatever I don't remember the exact number, $540,000 in cash. He sent us his stock portfolio, which was like over $1 million, and then he never saw the house. And I think it was one of those where it wasn't his idea to buy that house for his little girl, and so it was never going to happen. And because it was with a great agent, I mean, very professional. She'd been in the industry a long time, and I think it was just an interpersonal issue. If he'd have looked at the house himself and the kids didn't, it probably would have gone through. But it was only about 5,000 difference once we did that second bidding round. So they only went, down 5, but they'd already kind of come up 5. So they kind of met in the middle essentially. So it still worked out for them.
Well, that's an interesting segue into what's happening right now. We were bidding on houses and going above full price. Now we're at full price and negotiating somewhere between an offer and maybe 98, 97% of list. Houses in really good neighborhoods are selling for about 98, 97% of list, not the 100% that they were. So now you really need a good agent to get the number right on the listing side, and you need a good agent to weed out those overpriced listings, and just don't walk in and say, oh, we'll take $5,000 off list price and pay it. Well, what if it's overpriced by $30,000? You still paid $25,000 too much. So it's still a good time to put the numbers to work.
Yeah, and it's always tailored to the house, and I think people really get confused about that. Like, we're so detail oriented on, you're buying a house. I think people get confused because they buy assets or they buy things all the time, but it's such a big asset, and there's not that many of them, that even with comps, there's still some more to it. That's kind of, I guess, more the art that part of it than the science. But the science is such a big part because of the deal breaking or there being appraisals. So it's kind of what the house means to you, and then putting that all together intelligently, which I don't think a lot of people do, or a lot of realtors do. And that's how you really come and get those good deals on both sides. And when I say good, I mean win-win or properly priced and those kind of things.
Oh, I like to win. I prefer to be on the winning side. But here's the biggest trap a lot of people fall into in real estate is the price per foot. Oh, we got it for $200 price per foot, $150 price per foot. Well, it sold for so much price per foot. All of that's irrelevant unless things are identical. If one house is on an acre lot and the other is on a half-acre lot, what's price per foot? One house has a swimming pool, an outdoor living area, a fire pit, a spa, and a third-car garage, and the other house is built exactly the same, except it doesn't have those amenities. It just has a nice backyard. What does price per foot have to do with those two deals? What you really, really want to do is find a lot that's identical, a house that's similar in size, and then make adjustments for a little bit larger, a little bit smaller, a third-car garage, a swimming pool, a spa, a gazebo, whatever's there, you make adjustments. And don't fall into the trap, because I promise you, there are a lot of idiot agents out there who just throw the price per foot out at you and say, oh, it's a great value, you should pay. Look at what all these houses sold for at price per foot. And this is the trap you fall into if you don't look at the interior photos of the comparable sales and find out that they're truly comparable. If they're not truly comparable, price per foot doesn't mean anything.
I do see a lot of houses listed like that where they don't have the upgrades, or it's in a neighborhood that's maybe built like around 2000 that had Formica countertops and had kind of uglier tile, well, outdated tile, and carpet, and it's the last house to get updated, and then most of the neighborhood has been updated, and then they're basically 30,000 above because they haven't done all these updates, and it just sits, and you just like, that's why you have to understand the market and the comps.
Exactly.
But there is sometimes where, what I like to tell people too on this whole scenario is each house is actually worth something different to someone else. And just to give a quick example, think of if you had a relative that you wanted to live next to. Not that we would have that, right? But if you had a relative, maybe you need to take care of them or you want to hang out with them a lot, and the house next door to them comes up for sale, you're probably willing to pay up for that same house versus someone that's just moving into town and is purely looking at the data. So I think there's some more there too. And that came up in actually a deal that I had in Rockwall where I was the listing agent, and we had priced the house pretty aggressively because it was kind of the beginning of that COVID mania, so to speak. And it was like, there's probably no chance we're going to sell it for this, but if we come down or maybe we negotiate down, it'll work out, and we're still going to be above what maybe the range was anyway. So we really went top of that range. And it turned out that an investor wanted to buy it. They felt like they got a good deal because they bought lower than the list price, which again, we thought was too high, the sellers, but we're like, it's a mania. Let's just give it a shot. In that case, I think it's a better idea. And they felt like they were getting a deal as the investor buying it, but the sellers got a good deal because what I did is I paired this together because the sellers were actually going to move out of their house into temporary housing and then move into a new build they were building. By the way, they had a 3-year-old son at the time. So as you can imagine, that's not a very fun activity. I'll find out more about that one day. But we ended up doing a deal a little bit lower. We worked out the rent for a temporary, it wasn't a lease back, it was actually a lease for like 6 months. And it was a good investor. It was people like us, not like a big company or something. And the whole deal included them living there until their new home was built at a reasonable lease amount. The investor was happy because they had a tenant. They didn't have to go find and pay those realtor fees and have it on the, just sitting there. And so we wrapped it all together, and that family got to spend their last Christmas where they had their son come home from the hospital to in that house for one more time, and it really worked out well for everybody. So you kind of, if you use that critical thinking on top of the science, you can really get a good deal that works out very well for everybody.
That's a good point, because most people think of two things in a contract: how much am I paying, and when do I close? But there's all these other little details. The Texas Real Estate Commission is on 11 pages, and there's over 24 paragraphs, and each paragraph represents a lawsuit. So if you really plan through it, here's a really good story for you. I had this couple wanted to buy this house in Keller, and it was going to get multiple offers. And in this particular case, the listing agent was a minimal service company where all they do is put a sign in the yard and put it in MLS, and then the seller takes care of everything else. And so the seller meets us at the door, and this good-looking couple with their little babies are walking through, and I could tell he's kind of got grandfatherly kind of guy, and he's liking them, and he's thinking these are good kids. And so we put our offer in, and I slip in one detail that he didn't catch. I put in a 10-day option period instead of a 5 or 7-day option period. We were like 20 above list price, and they were highly qualified, and we kind of left the 10-day option period in there, and we wrote in that we waived appraisal. Well, the buyer's dad just happened to be a mortgage officer, and he got our appraisal done in 5 days. So if it didn't appraise, we were still within our rights to back out. And their house had just gone under contract, and we made sure that the buyer's house was a 5-day option period. So we got appraisal done in 5 days. We got their inspection done on the house they were selling in 5 days. And so there was smooth sailing afterwards, and they still had 5 days left to do their own inspection and back out. Now, all of those details allowed us to present an offer to a seller who didn't ask the question whether they had a house to sell, that we had a house to sell. And so we still got to buy the house, still got to waive appraisal, and they're living there happily ever after.
Yeah, and what I like about all these stories is none of this includes us being dishonest, and actually shows us working hard for our clients. And none of these were advantageous to us, right? Like, I didn't make any more on that Rockwall deal where I worked out that lease. I didn't take even a commission on that lease. You didn't make anything additional for working out this deal with that house. The two of us looked at the information and the facts and came up with these better ways of doing it. And I always tell clients, I love to win the game within the game. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're talking about here. So I think it's good to hear, going back to the original story and to close it out here, I think it just shows that you can be a good realtor and do a lot for your clients without being dishonest. And I think that's what we showed here.
Yeah. Russell, you just want to give you a quick update on what's happening in the marketplace. It is starting to slow down so far as the listings coming on the market, which is to be expected. This should be the lowest ebb of all the listings coming on the market on a week-by-week basis toward the end of August, because we're all back to school and we're getting the kids in band and football and all the fun stuff. So just in the overall marketplace, the Grapevine, Colleyville, Keller, Southlake marketplace added 30 listings this week. 21 went under contract, and there's a total of 304 houses on the market in those 4 cities. In the Alliance Corridor, in the last 7 days, they've added 51 listings. That's down 15 listings from the week before, which is exactly what we want to see, that we're going to slow down for just a couple weeks and then start picking back up. Active option, they just went under contract, 39 in that marketplace. Total listing in that Alliance Corridor is 399 listings. Flower Mound, Capel, Highland Village, last 7 days, only 18 listings. That's kind of low. That's still 5 below what they listed the week before. Active option, they had a good week in selling. They sold 26. Total listings in that marketplace, 202. Frisco, Plano, this one's a little disconcerting. It's actually adding too many listings at this point. They added 100 listings in the last 7 days. Active option, only 59. That's a little lower. That's actually 13 fewer active options than the week before. And their total listings over there is 692. Now, one bit of good news is the mortgage rates are headed south this week. Last week at this time, 7.36 was the national average. This week, the national average is 7.07. So that's 3/10 of a point heading the right direction. So hopefully we'll see a little bit lower next week. I would really like to see what would happen if we had 6.8 or 6.9 something, to see if that would shake the market a little bit, because there is a number there that just feels better to have a 6 in front of it instead of a 7. So, Russell, that's the numbers.
All right, that was the market rundown. So thanks for joining us today. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.